Chapter 109.11. Are you more humble than I thought? Humble? What do you mean? Anyway, I understand. I will speak as the bishop wishes. Upon hearing Johan's words, the bishop sighed in relief. The most difficult part had been resolved. But if an inspector comes, won't this splendid mansion be a bit risky? Brother, you're still naive. Would an inspector dislike gold? Would a judge refuse gold? Such luxury can easily be overlooked. Of course, they didn't hand over gold coins openly. They would accidentally find books or valuables that the inspector or judge was interested in and present them as gifts. It was something they had done many times, and it was what the bishop was best at. Aren't you the naive one, bishop? If you're going to handle things, do it properly. Normally, it might be fine, but now you're under attack from the order. And yet, you still try to solve things with bribes as usual. What if an adversary or opponent sent by your rival comes? Or someone who can be bought with such means? It's a time when not even a minor fault should be found. Johan's reproach made the bishop's face turn red. He had hit a sore spot. Long stays in high positions dull one's sense of reality and make one insensitive to danger. The bishop was still not out of his reverie. That makes sense. Far from overlooking, they might use it as a flaw to exaggerate. I see. He'll have the servants clear out the items in the mansion. Bishop, people are gathered outside praying. How can you move the items? At night, when there are no people. These people pray even at night. What? What are the night guards doing? Why aren't they dispersing them? Johan looked at the bishop as if he couldn't believe it. Forcing the praying people to leave would only cause trouble. Realizing this, the bishop coughed awkwardly. Brother, what should we do then? Let's distribute them. To the people outside. What? Bishop clutched his heart, more startled than when he encountered a gargoyle. Absolutely not. How could we do such a thing? Watching the bishop, who was more obsessed with gold than merchants, Johan said. Bishop, now is the time to put aside your greed. Isn't there something more important than gold? No. What else is there? For more gold, let it go for a while. Johan held the bishop's shoulder, looked into his eyes, and spoke. Bishop felt overwhelmed by the strength of Johan's spirit and averted his gaze. I understand. You have many other mansions, Bishop. Don't be too sad about clearing out a few things. Cutting off one of 10 fingers still hurts. In agony, the bishop eventually agreed. He was convinced by Johan's words. Call the mercenaries. With the bishop's permission and authority, Johan called the mercenaries. It wasn't to devise a scheme for the greedy bishop. Obviously, he had something else in mind. From now on, we'll gather items from the mansion and distribute them to the citizens outside. Has His Excellency passed away? One of the mercenaries showed a natural reaction. Otherwise, it wouldn't have made sense. No. He originally intended to distribute them to the citizens, but he was afraid that he might not be able to do so and meet his death. Sir Knight, the bishop may be possessed by a malevolent spirit. Can't you exorcise the malevolent spirit like you did before? Be quiet. From now on, we will gather the gold and treasures inside the mansion and scatter them outside. Everyone pick one thing you want. The mercenaries' faces brightened. Thank you. Thank you. The bishop is perfectly fine. I spoke foolishly. Johan called galambos out from among the mercenaries. Galambos. If it weren't for you in this gargoyle hunt, we couldn't have caught it. I acknowledge your contribution, and you will be the first to pick whatever you want. Choose anything you like. Tha. Thank you. Galambos was stunned. Other mercenaries already knew Johan was generous, but Galambos had less experience with it. Galambos looked around cautiously. The mansion was filled with all sorts of lavish valuables. Silver candlesticks and goblets, a golden cabinet made from cut marble, rare glass pieces, and more. He worried that if he really chose something, his wrist might be cut off. If you can choose, I'll pick a few for you. Johan, noticing Galambos' hesitation, picked up a few bracelets and threw them into his arms. Dazzled by the shining gold, Galambos bowed his head in gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. Hurry up and choose. The other mercenaries are waiting because of you. Galambos looked back. The other mercenaries were glaring with fiery eyes, a silent signal for him to hurry up and make way. Chapter 109.2.1. Thanks to spreading the estate's wealth at the mansion, the bishop's popularity was skyrocketing when Haramrik arrived in the city. Sir! Congratulations indeed! I always believed in your abilities. Having heard the rumors on his way, Haramrik incessantly praised Johan's achievements. From Haramrik's perspective, he felt he had grasped the right opportunity. But why have you called me? I wanted to introduce you to Sir Gerald, a council member. He owns a fiefdom in the Ulcana Peninsula and will be of great help to you. Such a noble for me. Thank you. Sir, you're the only one who thinks of me. Ha ha. That's high praise. Come, this way. Haramrik and Gerald heartily boosted each other's morale. Haramrik praised Gerald's bravery and loyalty, while Gerald lauded Haramrik's noble character and lineage. The conversation was possible because each was under a misconception about the other. Despite having nothing substantial left, both were highly satisfied. Gerald even teared up. It was true that Johan had not lied. If it weren't for you, sir, I would still be deceived, doing menial tasks for others. You recognized the value of a sir, didn't you? Now, in the council, no one dares speak ill of the bishop. Everyone is cautious and watchful. Johan nodded. Gerald had been steadily doing well in his role as a spy. And, as Gerald hesitated, Johan was puzzled. The magistrate wants to see you quietly. The magistrate? In the Republic, once elected, a magistrate remained in position until death. Although power was more dispersed, the position was no less significant than that of a feudal lord or king. Having met once and being summoned again. What could it be? I don't know. But, sir. Gerald, holding Johan's hand, spoke earnestly. Whatever the magistrate says, you must not forget our friendship. Gerald feared Johan might completely fall for the magistrate. The elected magistrate, a council member, came from a historic noble family in the city and had strong connections with others. In comparison, Gerald, of Empire origin, was no match. If such a magistrate tempted Johan with various rites and persuasive words, Gerald would be left hanging. Aren't you worrying too much? No. You don't know how dirty the nobles' tactics can be here. They bribe and draw people in as naturally as breathing. Would I, of Empire origin, not know honor? You can trust me. However important socializing was, pacifying Haramrik and Gerald was quite a hassle. Before long, Johan found himself looking down on Gerald, who was oblivious to it. Contrary to Gerald's worries, the magistrate's intention was not to separate them. Also, the magistrate had no particular intention of making Johan one of his own. If it had been an ordinary knight, or an ordinary mercenary captain, he might have tried to grill them. After all, having many swords was never a bad thing. But Johan was too outstanding. At such a young age, having attained the honor of being a duke's equerry and hunting monsters, it was unlikely that he would be satisfied with the life of a city guard captain. The magistrate called him for a secret agreement. If you wish to reconcile with His Excellency the Bishop, you should speak with him, not me. No, no. Sir. It's not about Bishop Biagoni. Of course, given the situation, we should reconcile with Bishop Biagoni and not fight anymore, but I wouldn't have called you for that. Just sending the appropriate amount of gold to the bishop's family could have ended things amicably. Do you know if the order has sent someone? Did they? Johan feigned ignorance. The magistrate nodded in satisfaction. I heard through my connections. Do you know why they are coming? Because Bishop His Excellency showed a miracle, so they're coming to verify. Of course, that's the purpose. They will come and verify. But their main objective is you. Johan tensed up. Had he been caught doing something suspicious? Caught using a malevolent spirit, or using an assassin's skills? They plan to use your strength to attack the fiefdom of Cardirian in the south. I'm almost certain of it. Johan was surprised by the unexpected statement. In the current Catalian Peninsula, the northern and central parts were filled with city-states and the Order's fiefdoms. But in the south, there were territories belonging to the Cardirian family and their vassals. The Empire was not on good terms with the peninsula. It periodically claimed rights over the territories of the peninsula, and several times it had invaded directly. In such a situation, the fiefdom in the far south served as a dagger thrust at their throat. It was natural for the order and city-states to consider it a thorn in their side. But an attack? Johann was deep in thought. The force Johann commanded was less than 1,000 strong. Of course, if he had enough gold, he could hire mercenaries as many as he wanted, but Johann was not that kind of lord. There must be dozens of mercenary captains like Johann on the peninsula. The order could not directly raise an army and attack. Inevitably, there had to be an intermediary, and this intermediary had to be trustworthy and capable, meeting several criteria. Firstly, they needed to be excellent in military strength and tactical skill. And since they had to side with the order and not the empire, someone from a major family of the empire would not do. Such a person could betray and side with their family. It had to be someone from a humble and weak family, who could not betray. Moreover, it couldn't be someone too brutal and barbaric. Supporting such a person could bring shame to the order. Johann suddenly realized how attractive he was to the religious order. His family was humble, but his reputation was high and he was faithful, making him a tantalizing prospect for the order. The magistrate was puzzled by Johann's silence. He didn't think that Johann had figured out what had happened in such a short time. "What's the matter?" "No, I was thinking about how to attack Kardirian's fiefdom." "On what grounds could we do that?" "Ha. Thinking about that, were you?" "It's very simple. The order will pick one of the feudal lords there, make up a suitable excuse, and strip him of his title. Then, His Holiness the Pope will personally bestow the title upon you." Of course, nothing had actually changed. Going there didn't mean the feudal lord would just say, and step aside. Naturally, there would be fierce resistance, and in the end, the fiefdom would have to be taken by force. But that pretext was important. Who could deny the legitimacy of a title publicly proclaimed and bestowed by the Pope of the Order? Won't Kardirian be angry? That guy is too busy with empire affairs to care. He won't even come down, he'll just have to look from afar. Anyway, they say they're going to bestow a title upon you, and they'll also provide various supports. At that time, don't forget to mention our name too. We definitely want to be involved in it. The magistrate did not hide his desire-filled attitude. In his prime, he had wielded iron power with the strength of his family. Now, it was time to confront the enemies he had made then. Once formed, the grudges did not disappear, and those who showed weakness once could not be safe. Chapter 110.1.2. Johann was not surprised. He would have been more surprised if he had met a noble on good terms with the emperor in this area. There are many people who have a grudge against Kardirian, and it would take a lot of help to attack Kardirian's fiefdom. So why would the order refuse help? Although Johann already guessed the reason, he deliberately asked as if he didn't know. The magistrate seemed even more satisfied with Johann's attitude. It's human nature to be at a disadvantage when the party you're conspiring with turns out to be more intelligent than you anticipated. Ha! The order wants to drive out the emperor's forces in the south, not wanting new enemies to emerge. The magistrate sneered. In fact, the magistrate would have felt the same even if he represented the order's standpoint. They didn't want to remove an enemy only to create a new one. Right now, the relationship between the order and the city-states was not bad, but it was uncertain if it would remain the same after the threat of the empire disappeared. However, the Republic was eager to get its hands on the south. It was a republic striving hard to acquire strategic locations in the Catalian Peninsula and Ulcana Peninsula, and the islands of the Aegean Sea. These were almost essential for stable trade. If what you said is true, will the order give permission? Of course. Your authority is not that weak, after all. Even though the order provided support and received a title in the name of the Pope, it was Johann who led the soldiers down to fight. There were limits to how much the order could control. It was no coincidence that the order was meticulous in choosing people. And our side also has connections with the order. We are continuously creating public opinion. Above all, it's not an unreasonable request. We're not asking for a fiefdom, just a few ports. It's enough if you just say the word. Authority over the ports of a fiefdom was very valuable, especially for a republic seeking trade. In truth, they could have given them away easily. After all, Johann didn't currently hold those fiefdoms. And if he came to possess the southern fiefdoms, a few ports would be a fair price to pay. Above all, of course, it wouldn't be just for any reason, a suitable justification would be necessary, but it was definitely doable. If he framed it as the Republic conspiring or betraying, he could reclaim the ports. The magistrate was under a misconception due to Johan's good reputation, but Johan had no hesitation in such matters. With our help, it would be much easier for you, wouldn't it? Of course, the order will support you, but the more help, the better. You are right. If we could borrow the fleet of the Republic, it would make things several times easier. Pleased with Johan's response, the magistrate smiled. He opened his mouth to drive the point home. I heard you are the feudal lord of Dolek and Palmon. Nice towns, but their development is a bit slow due to their location, isn't it? If you agree, we will send our engineers to build a naval base for you. Think about it. If you control the south, you can travel by ship along the Aegean Sea all the way to the north. Johan clicked his tongue, not because the offer was bad, but because it was too good. There was a misunderstanding about Johan, but fundamentally, the magistrate had confidence in himself. Confidence that even if Johan built naval ports in those two towns first, he wouldn't be able to betray them. It was the confidence that if Johan betrayed them, they could cut off the sea to hinder him, and the confidence in their fleet roaming the Aegean Sea. Johan decided to abandon the idea of betrayal and cooperate for now. Just cooperating wasn't a bad condition. If you could do that for me, I'd be grateful, but I'm worried I might not be able to keep my word. The order might not listen to me. Ha ha ha. The magistrate laughed. And then said, no. They will listen to you. Plenty. Using you in that way is a very cheap trick, after all. Chapter 110.2. 2. As Suitk and the magistrate said, the inspector arrived in the city with his escorts. The bishop greeted them from his bed with a devoted performance. The inspector was amazed by the empty mansion and the citizens praising the bishop. The inspector was no fool. He knew about the rumors about the bishop that had reached the order. However, despite the rumors, it was true that the bishop had accomplished something now. The higher echelons of the order were divided into two factions. One was called the aristocratic faction. They were children of quite decent families, who had risen through strong support from their families, even if their faith was a bit lacking. Bishop Biagoni was a prime example of this. The other was made up of priests who had lived a faithful and frugal life from a young age in the order's monasteries or temples, armed with almost fanatical faith. Surprisingly, most of them had experience showing miracles. It was, in fact, expected. Without doing so, it was impossible for a priest who rose from the bottom without any support to reach a high position. They were called the miracle faction in the order and made various powerful arguments. Normally, the aristocratic faction, backed by families, should have been more dominant, but in the order, the miracle faction always had the upper hand. It was because of long traditions, customs, reputation, and public sentiment. A bishop who had shown a miracle and one who hadn't had different influences in their words. Moreover, traditionally, the pope was chosen from among bishops who had shown miracles. The miracles shown by the priests were astonishing and powerful. But for Bishop Biagoni to have done it was almost unbelievable. Everyone present agreed. Honestly, if he did, that would be truly amazing. At this, the bishop leaped up in surprise. The blanket he was covered with flew off. Johann spoke from beside him. The bishop insisted that he would die on the way to the Pope's court, even if it meant death. The inspector nodded his head, as if he had expected it. After joining the soldiers who were waiting outside, the group prepared to depart and immediately moved. But is it something to be so excited about? Of course, brother. Do you know how much of an honor it is to meet the Pope in person? Have you never met him? Johann was puzzled. It was customary for someone in the bishop's position to go to the Pope's court and face the Pope in person. But the bishop spoke as if he had never met him before. I've never met him in person. I don't know. Do you know that most priests who reach the bishop's position are so devout that they have shown miracles? What did the bishop show? It's not necessary to show it, but anyway. The Pope is the most outstanding among them. Miracles such as ending a drought that had lasted for months, restoring a polluted river to its original state, and healing the blind and lame. The miracle-oriented bishops all had a strong reputation. In order to be elected Pope, it was not enough for an ordinary miracle. He died but was resurrected. What the? It's true. I've heard it too. Suitl added from the side. Most people understood it as simply dying and coming back to life, but the reality was a bit different. To be precise, the Pope died and his body did not move. But it did not rot or decay. It just remained as it was alive. Instead, a feather pen began to move and write beside the Pope. It was the Pope's handwriting from his lifetime. Everyone was amazed at this wonder. Johan's expression distorted strangely after hearing the detailed explanation. He had only thought that the Pope had shown the miracle of resurrection, so he had thought that he had just collapsed and gotten up. Johan poked Sinurna. Why? Isn't that a malevolent spirit? I thought I was the only one who thought that. In kind of glad? Sinurna turned pale. If you treated the church's miracles as malevolent spirits, you could be treated as malevolent spirits and burned at the stake. Even Suitlig showed a reverent appearance when hearing about such miracles, right? But Sinurna was different. She was skeptical about miracles. She believed that it was just unstable and accidental magic. Wait a minute. I've felt it since the last time, but are you really devout? Sinurna poured out her doubts that she had been holding for a long time. Of course, Johan's actions were excellent knights of faith. There was no better way for a knight to prove his faith than to hunt monsters. Johan avoided answering and said, So have you ever been to the Pope's court? I wasn't there when Kardirian led the army to attack the Pope's court, right? Sinurna casually brought up sensitive history. The emperor had fought with the church several times, and if the dispute became serious, he would not hesitate to send troops to attack. The Pope's court is in the sacred Mount Cyrindel, and I heard that Kardirian had a hard time because of that. He keeps talking about that time over and over again when he's drunk. It's common for people to act like that as they get older. Suitlig made an excuse on his behalf. Johan chuckled. Aklada spoke with a hint of regret. I wanted to see the capital of the ancient empire once, but it's a shame it didn't happen. Weren't you not particularly interested in cities? To the centaurs, a city was nothing more than a target for looting. Therefore, Aklada's words were somewhat surprising. The capital of the ancient empire is different. I'm curious how magnificent it is. Don't get too excited. It's not much different from the city of Bayern. The cities that date back to the ancient empire are each large and beautiful in their own way. In front of the Cyrindel mountain on the plain, there was a city known as the capital of the ancient empire, Eurononium. The city among cities, a nickname like the city of all cities, but Suitlig shook his head. Rather, other cities that weren't destroyed might be better. It's one of the most destroyed cities. Please stop saying that. Euclea is also looking forward to it. Is that so? I'm sorry then. Johan said, looking at the two. Since we're not going to attack the mountain anyway, there will be plenty of opportunities to show you around. Don't worry. I was counting on you, Sir Knight. Aklada said with a grin. So, how was the city? Well, Johan had not yet talked about the secret pact he had been involved in inside the city. In fact, the magistrate might not have fully grasped it. He couldn't be sure until he heard directly from the order. You caught a demon, tell us about that story. We're curious too. Those who hadn't experienced it directly were bursting with curiosity. They envied the mercenaries who had fortunately participated. The inspector listened intently to the conversation. Truth always emerged not from the parties involved but from those around them. Already having heard too many unbelievable things about the bishop, the inspector hoped for a more plausible story. Chapter 111.1.3. Shortly after, the inspector looked at the mercenaries who had participated in the gargoyle hunt as if it was absurd. What was even more absurd was the other warriors accepting such talks as if they were natural. The inspector felt like the only sane person left among crazy people. After the discussion about the gargoyle hunt ended, the mercenaries and warriors also talked about werewolves and trolls, which was equally absurd. Was it so bad that the story of the bishop distributing wealth seemed the most plausible? I have just one question. At the inspector's words, the mercenaries nodded. Those present were mercenaries from the Empire or tribal warriors seeking to join the Order of the Empire. They were favorably inclined towards monotheism and showed much interest in the church. Ask anything, priest. Did Bishop Biajoni really scatter gold? Do you not see this bracelet? It was indeed scattered by him. The mercenaries were simple-minded. They spoke well of those who gave them something. Although it was thanks to Johan's instructions, they did not speak ill of the bishop after receiving his wealth. As a result, the inspector, who had only heard overly different stories from the rumors, began to feel confused. As an inspector of the church with long experience, he was not easily swayed or deceived. There was a clear difference between those who were greedy and deceitful and those who sincerely believed in God and lived modestly. However, occasionally, there were people who underwent a great shock and changed. It wasn't unheard of for a debauched person to hear the voice of God, repent, and feel remorse. Had Bishop Biagoni experienced such a thing? Had he witnessed a miracle and glimpsed the holiness of God? Is there no way to deal with that, Inspector, brother? What, are you suggesting assassination? The bishop was startled at Johann's words. He looked around nervously. Fortunately, there was no one nearby to overhear, given the long procession. Are you mad? Not that. The inspector keeps prying. If the mercenaries say something strange, the mercenaries won't speak out of turn. Is that really so? Can you guarantee it? What will you do if I can't? Why you shouldn't talk like that. It's not like Biagoni said anything impossible. The bishop shrank back as Johann spoke sternly. Having seen Johann's true nature and owing him a great debt from the gargoyle hunt, he couldn't afford to be arrogant, even as an employer. If the magistrate's words were true, the church had little interest in dismissing the bishop. Therefore, there was a high chance they would conclude the investigation casually. Of course, Johann had no intention of telling him that. It would complicate the story. We've reached the town. As it's a fiefdom of the church, we should be able to rest comfortably. Send someone to inform the entourage that the bishop and inspector are present and to prepare hospitality. The rest will set up camp outside. Yes, I'll do so. As soon as the order was given, Johann's subordinates quickly moved, regardless of their disorderly composition. The inspector was amazed at the sight of them moving in divisions, such as those who would enter the town to deliver the message, those who would scout around, those who would set up the camp and establish the border, and those who would check the water source and prepare drinking water. Frankly, it was strange that a knight like Johann was carrying such a jumbled group of subordinates, but seeing such a well-ordered appearance made sense. The inspector was curious and asked, "Will you not let the mercenaries into the town?" If even a few of the more than 100 mercenaries entered the town, it would be a burden for the town. It would be a huge expense, not to mention the damage if there was any disturbance. But it was also impossible not to let them in. No one likes to camp while being hit by the cold dew. Even if not all of them, those who were captains or above were often allowed in. It doesn't seem like a wealthy town. It would be a heavy burden if they entered. It would be better to have them wait outside, except for the minimum escort. Your honor is truly honorable. The inspector was very satisfied with Johann's response. Nobles often preached faith but acted otherwise. If there was surplus, it should be given to the starving and naked serfs, not wasted on luxuries. In this respect, Johann's actions, consistent with the rumors, were truly satisfying. It was hoped that other spirited knights would learn from him. Furthermore, it was remarkable that the mercenaries showed no dissatisfaction with such orders. Even with good intentions, controlling rough men required strength. Without it, words were empty. The inspector doubted Bishop Biagoni, believing that his abilities could easily manipulate this young knight. If so, the bishop would be guilty of yet another sin. Ah, crazy guys. Why are you wandering around at night? Aren't you afraid of monsters? Hey! Stop! Stop with the torches and reveal yourself first. The mercenaries on guard swore as they saw a group of torches approaching from a distance. What? What's happening? Some guys are coming this way. They seem like the kind of bastards who would skin us alive. I hope they're just a gang of rogues. The people at the camp were stirred up. Johann, who had been asleep, pushed off the Karamaf covering him and got up. Karamaf let out an annoyed growl. Sir Knight. Didn't you go into town? Marco and Gerdolf going is enough. We're not without the order's escort. I can rest alone while you guys are here, can't I? Don't be too kind. Rookies won't adapt if they go somewhere else. The mercenaries spoke nonchalantly, but their eyes were filled with emotion. So, who are these people? Chapter 111.2.3. They've gone to check now. They'll be back soon. True to their word, they soon returned with information. The group approaching from afar were also mercenaries. It was a fairly large mercenary troop, numbering over 100. Are they really mercenaries? Sir Knight. They could also be a gang of rogues. Isn't it strange that mercenaries appear near this road at this time? There wouldn't have been any work around here. You're right. Moreover, moving at night is suspicious. Unless it's something urgent. Contrary to what others were saying, Johann thought it was surprisingly likely that they could be mercenaries. If the magistrate's words were true, the order would be calling mercenaries from various places. The order, even in the name of the Pope, would make even the most arrogant mercenaries try their best to be on time. It wouldn't be strange for them to move at night. They're making a fuss about wanting to rest quickly. What should we do? Tell him I have no intention of talking to him and to move aside. I need to wake up the village chief and talk to him directly. What's going on in front of us that's causing such a fuss in the middle of the night? Some mercenaries are blocking our way into the town. Did the town hire them or something? I don't know. Well, find out when their leader shows up. As if he would come out in the middle of the night. If he doesn't come out, we'll have to resort to force. If he has any sense, he will come. It wasn't just one group of mercenaries here. Other mercenary groups following the same path also arrived one after another. They were exhausted from non-stop movement. Even if they couldn't enter the town, they at least wanted to get some food and drink from the townspeople. But then, there was a group of mercenaries blocking the entrance. It was frustrating. We are soldiers serving Bishop Biagioni. If you're mercenaries, behave honorably. What? A bishop? Ah. Upon hearing the name of Bishop Biagioni, the mercenary captains hesitated, but unfortunately, one of them happened to be overly knowledgeable. Bishop Biagioni is not from this diocese, but from that republic. He has no business being here. Oh. I thought you were dumb, but not bad. Want to die, you bastard? Shut up. Everyone. Is now really the time? The mercenary captains hurled insults at each other. Just because they were traveling together didn't mean they were friendly. Not attacking each other on sight was friendly enough. So is that fake? Most likely it is. Hurry and tell their leader to come out. If he doesn't, well, attack. Those guys must be getting nervous seeing our numbers increase. Having seen more torch-bearing groups arriving behind the initial arrivals, they must have understood the situation. Gierlich scratched his dusty cheek. While the mercenary captain's words weren't wrong, something bothered him. The opposing camp was too orderly. He began to wonder if they really were soldiers serving a bishop. Wait. We should check it out just in case. What are we going to do? If they are the ones who are following the bishop, there must be evidence in their camp. Let's go and check it out. What a nuisance. No, honestly, it's not a bad idea. It's better to avoid unnecessary fights. We're not getting paid for this. Even among the mercenary captains, there were those who agreed with Gierlich's words. The mercenaries who belong to a mercenary company are each the property of the mercenary captain. They hated to waste soldiers unnecessarily. Gierlich rode his horse quickly with a few guards. He was thinking of seeing what kind of people they were up close. Oh. Why are you babbling like an idiot? Can't you speak properly? Oh. How dare this bastard? Gierlich glared and became angry when his subordinate ignored his words. He was about to hit the subordinate with his fist. That's the Monster Knight, isn't it? Monster Knight? What the hell is that? Gierlich turned his head and almost fell off his horse when he saw Johann coming out of the front camp. The horse neighed loudly and shook its body. Gierlich hurriedly held on and narrowly avoided making a fool of himself. Gierlich, it's been a while. I thought you were in Umdim. So Johann. Gierlich expressed gratitude with his sharp eyes and stroked his chest. If he had left it alone out of annoyance, many people would have been troubled. And more people would have died. What brings you here? As I said, I am accompanying His Excellency the Bishop. What about you? Me and other mercenaries were heading to the front of the Cyrindle mountain at the request of the order. Indeed, Johann's prediction was correct. Johann nodded without surprise. Were you on a forced march? There is not only the bishop, but also a priest from the order who came out to work, so we will not be held responsible for arriving a little late. Tell them to slow down if it's okay. Thank you. Gierlich inadvertently saluted and then realized. He had been completely intimidated and was speaking formally. It wasn't usually like this. Suddenly, he felt immensely embarrassed. There was a subordinate right beside him. What a disgraceful behavior. However, the subordinate seemed not to find it strange at all. Hey, I didn't think it was that Monster Knight. I never thought I'd meet him in this place. Even if he was with the captain, he still takes care of us, doesn't he? He was confused whether to be grateful that his subordinates were shameless idiots, or to be more humiliated. Upon recognizing the opponent, Johann strongly wielded the authority of the bishop along with the name of the flag-bearer. With Gulick's testimony added, the mercenaries had no choice but to follow reluctantly, as if eating mustard in tears. Really, I didn't know there would be a bishop and an inspector over there. They grumbled and lay sprawled out in the field. Why are the mercenaries here? Something seems strange. At Bishop Biagioni's words, the inspector coughed. Thanks to the bishop he was accompanying, he knew why these mercenaries were gathering here. Is something happening in the order? Could it be that the emperor is planning to invade? No, the emperor wouldn't have the resources to do so. Then could it possibly be the king of Erlands? It wasn't a good sign that the order was gathering soldiers. The bishop asked various questions, but the inspector evaded them to the end. Sir Knight, it seems you should be careful. The mercenaries are quite discontented. A cladder returned and said. The mercenary captains who arrived late seemed to be looking at Johann with disdain. They were starved for half a day? Why do you ask when you know? Isn't it because you are too close to the order? In our tribe, families close to the chief also receive jealousy. The mercenary captains responding to the call of the order were not simply after gold. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put in so much effort. They desired advancement. Chapter 112.14. The highest achievement for mercenaries was to receive a fiefdom and become nobility. Most mercenaries never reached this point, dying of old age or in battle. Even receiving a small town was considered a significant success. Nobles who owned fiefdoms preferred to employ mercenaries with silver and gold, rather than giving away land. However, the situation was a bit different with the order. The order had the power to grant fiefdoms to mercenaries. This was more feasible because they were not giving away their own lands. The order had the power to strip other nobles of their fiefdoms and legitimately give mercenaries the justification and rights to take over those lands. The order had done similar things several times before. They would call mercenaries to support an attack on the order's enemies and then settle them on that land. It was natural to feel envious seeing those who were once mercenaries sitting arrogantly dressed as nobles. It seems they don't know the exact purpose. Johann muttered. This summoning was not about subduing one or two minor noble families. It was about fighting against all the emperor's nobles in the southern peninsula. The mercenaries were thinking of titles like Lord or Baron, but considering the scale of this mission, it wouldn't be surprising if a Count title was offered. What? Is there some other purpose? I'll tell you if it's confirmed. It's just a guess for now. A cladder showed no dissatisfaction at Johann's words. The ruler of the steppe had to be cunning and know how to hide their intentions. Even if Johann was being vague, it was just another sign of his qualifications. So, a cladder, how did you deal with such discontented people? How did I deal with them? Ignored the insignificant ones and crushed those who got arrogant in front of me. I should do the same then. I'll keep that in mind. Oh. Are you leaving now? No. Ah. At a cladder's reaction, Johann smiled and said, Contact now. Just wait a little longer. Johann understood the mercenaries' reactions. They were still unaware of the exact details of the mission. Eventually, it was likely that Johann would lead them south. Such people couldn't be subdued by immediate violence. Waiting would naturally create justification and opportunity. At Johann's words, a cladder bowed his head. Johann must surely have something in mind. Having trusted him once, a cladder simply followed. Many people were surprised, but Gulick, despite his fierce appearance, was a quick-witted and agile person. That's why he was the first to make a decision this time as well. After resting, his mind was clearer and more agile. No matter how he looks at it, Johann seems likely to hold a different and significant position in this gathering. Other mercenary captains seemed not to expect that Johann would take on the role of a commander. Though Johann had gained fame for monster hunting, he was still too young and inexperienced. The mercenary captains present here usually had at least a decade, if not more, of experience in the battlefield. That's why they were even more confident. They thought it was absolutely impossible for that young knight to take on the role of a commander in the expedition. But Gulick had seen Johann himself. He had seen Johann leading nearly 1,000 soldiers southward without a hint of hesitation, and being the first to climb the high walls of Umdim and slaughter the enemies. If someone were to ask Gulick would honestly have to answer. What if the order had made a similar assessment? So Johann, who was teaching Euclia how to play Go, turned his head at the sound from outside. Euclia sneakily hid a Go piece. Anyway, I remember it all. What's the matter, sir? I came to join you in this endeavor. Please accept my sword. Dodo? Johann looked at Gulick as if he were a curiosity. He had expected one of the mercenary captains to pick a fight first, not come to swear allegiance. Really? For what reason? From what I see, you are bound to take on an important role in this gathering. Rather than competing fruitlessly, I want to follow your lead and earn a greater reward. Euclia muttered something in the Eastern tongue beside him, roughly praising Gulick's wisdom. Did you see that much value in it? You've already shown your worth in the city of Umdim. At that time, it was you and your men who excelled. Anyway, good. I'll accept. Johann cheerfully agreed. It was convenient for the mercenaries to kneel and come on their own, especially someone experienced like Gulick. Won't the other mercenary captains be angry if they find out? Actually, I'm already on my way here, skipping the gathering. Let them be as angry as they want. HMPH. Do you think I care about such things? Having already chosen his side, Gulick did not hesitate. And one couldn't afford to worry about relations between mercenary groups in this line of work. The most important thing was his own benefit, wasn't it? Chapter 112.2, 4. Gulick's departure created a larger reaction than expected. Among the mercenaries following Johann's forces, who were under the bishop, an awkward atmosphere lingered. Gulick himself isn't such a fool. Mercenary captains, who knew Gulick's character, groaned. It all seemed very strange, no matter how one looked at it. Johann was known to be a knight who had been achieving great feats recently, but was he so impressive as to switch sides like this? Still young and seemingly inexperienced. Some mercenary captains held back their words. If Gulick's judgment was correct, they started to hold back, planning to quietly switch sides. This was especially true for masters of relatively small mercenary groups, numbering around 100. Ambitious mercenary captains were very dissatisfied with this departure and gritted their teeth. Brother, let us pray for this holy mountain of Cyrandil. As they climbed the hill overlooking the Cyrandil mountains, the bishop said to Johann. Johann prayed with even more humble and earnest posture than the bishop. The inspector was truly satisfied. Is that Eurononium over there? The small-looking capital of the ancient empire seen from afar was, as Suetic said, more than half in ruins. And yet, the remaining area alone boasted an enormous scale, suggesting how beautiful the city must have been in its heyday. Your Excellency, Bishop. One of the mercenary captains approached, riding a horse. Uniquely, this mercenary captain was an elf, clearly a lower noble from the Erland's kingdom. There are swarms of rogues in the forest in front of the mountain. I request your permission for a punitive expedition. Oh. Bishop Biagioni was flustered. It was an unexpected and ill-fitting proposal. Mercenaries offering to do a job without pay? Johann smiled inwardly. It seemed the mercenaries wanted to demonstrate their capabilities to the order by dealing with the rogues. But the order wouldn't change their judgment over something like this. He could imagine how frustrated they would feel upon realizing this. Isn't it a good proposal? Please grant your permission, Your Excellency, Bishop. The inspector was delighted. The swarms of rogues rampaging in the vast forest below the mountain had been causing pain to nearby towns. Dealing with them would be a service to the serfs. Biagioni looked to Johann for guidance. Unlike the inspector, the bishop was aware of the subtle power struggle unfolding between them. It was what he did best. Johann signaled with his eyes that it was okay. Gulick, who was watching this, was shocked. It wasn't the bishop controlling Johann, but Johann controlling the bishop. Even upon re-evaluation, it was unbelievable. If Johann wasn't the bishop's kin, this relationship made no sense. I permit it. Your dedication is indeed commendable. Yes. Thank you. The inspector asked Johann. Do you also plan to join them, sir? No. Someone must stay to protect His Excellency. I and the Willigo mercenary group will guard the bishop here. Once affection is formed, other actions also feel more welcome. Johan's actions, contrasted with the mistakes of a hot-blooded knight, appeared even more favorable. The inspector nodded in satisfaction. At this point, Gulick started to feel sorry for the other mercenary captains. They were blinded by pride and stubbornness, failing to make calculated decisions. Johan's army halted, and the following mercenaries started changing their formations, approaching the forest to search and punish the rogue swarms. That elf is the one leading the bastard of Arc 10. He used to hold the position of captain in the Wolves of Arc 10. Wolves of Arc 10. I've seen them before. Did you lead them? No. Johan's words didn't seem to concern Gulick much. They might have been on opposing sides, after all. The bastards are quite skilled at riding. Being from the Erland's kingdom, they are better than. Oops. I'm sorry. It's okay to speak freely. It happens. The elf knights always boasted that their horsemanship was the best, and indeed, people tended to rate the elf knight's skills above those of the Empire knights. So that's why elves were often seen. Yes. Elves are foul-tempered and arrogant, so they will likely offend the honor. Please be generous in your judgment. No. I like elves. Any other mercenaries to be wary of? The Gorgale mercenary group is famous for their crossbowmen. They are so skilled that they sometimes charge double. The mercenary group from Gorgale, armed with expensive crossbows, was known for their deadly attacks. They had even taken down several large monsters. And you should also be mindful of the Medusa mercenary group and the Mano mercenary group. Where are you going? Something's happened in the forest. Johan quickly stood up. Karamaf, realizing something was amiss, raised its head and glared. Smoke was rising from various parts of the forest, and faint screams could be heard. Enemy. It's the enemy. Prepare for battle. Prioritize protecting His Excellency. Yes. Johan directed his elite troops near the bishop, then donned his armor and rushed forward. Euclia followed, wielding a spear. The grass of the meadow rustled, and then dozens of people stood up. They realized they had been discovered. They had hoped to ambush the unsuspecting outside, but their opponents were too formidable. The Eastern warriors and mercenaries patrolled tirelessly, making it impossible for anyone, no matter how skilled, to approach undetected. We've been spotted. Run. Break through. The rogues, though caught, fiercely ignited their fighting spirit. Their approach had been stealthy, but they were no ordinary foes. Could they be mercenaries? Spears. Don't let them near the camp. Crush them. Johan and his warriors charged forward on horseback. The rogues, faced with mounted knights on the plains, gritted their teeth. Ha! Several of them dodged to the side, screaming wildly, and tried to unseat the horse-riding warriors with lassos. However, the Eastern warriors either handled their horses as if they were part of their own bodies, or were beings with the bodies of horses themselves. They easily evaded and struck down their foes with their weapons. Even when fatally wounded, the rogues neither retreated nor surrendered. They fiercely glared and swung their weapons, seemingly unaware of the blood pouring from their own bodies. Then there was no choice but to completely crush them. Move aside. Johan, wielding a mace, charged in. With each swing, the fierce rogues crumbled. The leader of the rogues looked at Johan in disbelief. Chapter 113.15. The rogues present here were not ordinary rogues. They were the ones he had personally trained. Thanks to the secret family recipe used to make the medicine they took, they felt no pain and were fierce to the point of not knowing fear. But in front of that knight, they fell like scarecrows. It's not like his men didn't know how to deal with someone on horseback. You country bumpkin from the Empire. Do you even know who you're dealing with? Even amidst the chaos, Johan clearly heard the others shout and dismissed it with disdain. Aren't they just a bunch of rogues? The three brothers of the Lizarek family. Remember who you're dealing with. Lizarek or whatever, I don't care. Die. Johan sneered. If they wanted to be taken as hostages by shouting about their noble status, they should have been more polite. How audacious to ambush and then be so brazen. However, the warrior of the Lizarek family seemed to have no intention of surrendering. He suddenly twisted his body backwards and hurled a dagger with a vicious sound. Normally, Johan could have easily parried it with his arm covered in surcoat and chainmail, as such a thrown weapon wouldn't have the power to penetrate the armor. But his instincts warned him. As he blocked with his shield, a chilling sound came. It was the sound of the dagger piercing the shield. It would have gone right through if it weren't steel. The techniques passed down in families weren't just swordsmanship. It was easy to mistake it for just that because of the knights, but the noble knight families originally included a variety of occupations, including looters, farmers, and shepherds. In this world, it wasn't the age where information was widely spread if available, it was an era of monopolizing it, especially if the technique was valuable. The way that weapon was thrown clearly indicated it was a family secret. Considering what the opponent said, he seemed to be from a knight family. When Johann blocked the attack aimed to pierce his throat, the warrior clicked his tongue and shouted, "Come at me! Just try it. You'll rush in like the coward you are." The man had unusually long arms and legs, and his movements were quick. He bounced his body to react nimbly at the moment the horse charged. Johann always did the opposite of what his opponent wanted. Johann raised his spear in defense as Karamaf came running up to block the front of the horse. With this, the warrior had no choice but to engage first. If he charged at the horse, Karamaf would block him, and if he threw something, Johann would counter with his spear. The warrior cursed at the sight of controlling the wolf. Such a despicable country bumpkin. I wonder if the wolf understands that. Johann tightened his grip on the spear, ready to throw it at the first sign of the opponent's vulnerability. Sensing this, the warrior hesitated. His warrior instincts were also at play. One mistake could mean death. "Come on. I said attack." Johann ignored him, further infuriating the warrior. The leader was stuck, unable to do this or that, while his men were getting destroyed. Normally, their morale would have broken, and they would have fled, but these few who charged in fought to the end. It took time, but they were soon subdued and surrounded. Then, Johann leisurely spoke. "You said you're from the Lizarek family? Will you surrender?" "A dog with no honor. I'd rather die than surrender. My brothers will avenge me." "As you wish." As Johann waved his hand, arrows flew from all directions. The Lizarek family warrior leapt but couldn't get far before collapsing. "Deal with it. Check what the Lizarek family is up to, and send a messenger to the forest. We might need to send reinforcements, considering the situation. The wise always end up cleaning up. That's how the world works." The Lizarek brothers were one of the famous rogue gangs. Originally a true knightly family, they turned into rogues after their family's downfall. Among the rogues, these rogue knights were the most difficult to deal with. Well-equipped and skilled, some of these reckless rogue knights even committed their misdeeds within their own fiefdoms. About 6 years ago, there was a major subjugation in the east, and we haven't heard from them since then. I had no idea they would be here. Upon hearing Gulick's words, Johann asked, "They're not worth any ransom or bounty, are they?" "Their family has fallen, so the only ones who could pay a ransom would be their other siblings. And a bounty would be difficult, wouldn't it? It's been 6 years, and the nobles they captured are probably all dead by now." "They captured nobles?" "Yes. They were skilled at hostage situations. Not just extorting tolls and looting from passers-by, but kidnapping nobles for ransom. Truly bold, befitting their knightly heritage. We might have to behead him and present it to the city." Johann was surprised to find the captured rogue more notable than expected, but his task remained unchanged. Johann had his soldiers positioned near the forest, ready to move at any moment. He planned to decide whether to go in once the messenger returned. The bishop cautiously asked, "Shouldn't we go in now?" "Why would we need to do that?" "For fear of tarnishing the brothers' reputation." "You don't need to worry about that." The bishop was needlessly worried. Showing bravado here wouldn't help Johann's evaluation. Rather, maintaining calm and composure would likely improve the inspector's assessment. The messenger's return coincided with the mercenaries emerging from the forest. "The mercenaries are coming out!" The messenger ran out, and soon after, dozens of disheveled mercenaries crawled out in turn. Johann clicked his tongue. He could tell how much they had been toyed within the forest. Fortunately, there weren't many casualties. Most were either slightly injured or exhausted. They managed this because they maintained formation while being manipulated. This showed that they were not inexperienced mercenaries, they were well prepared for the forest. The mercenary captains had expressions of frustration and sorrow. Moreover, there was another shocking piece of news for them. Was there a surprise attack? Chapter 113.2, 5. Yes. It was too reckless to concentrate on the subjugation and let the main camp be attacked. I'm sorry. Let's move out. Upon Johan's command, the mercenary captains looked at him incredulously. Moving while the rogue gang was still in the forest? It was unbelievable. Shouldn't a knight at least try to finish the job himself? It seems the rogue gang is hidden deep in the forest, making them difficult to subdue. It would be rude to spend too much time here when we didn't gather for subjugation. But one of the mercenary captains started to speak but hesitated. There was no real counterargument to Johan's words. Besides, this was a fight without pay. Continuing could lead to severe discontent among the mercenaries. Still, isn't there a matter of saving face? An elf spoke up. It was definitely the elf from before, as Gulik had mentioned. While profit was important, saving face was equally crucial. If they retreated now, the mercenaries who had entered the forest would be made fools. Since we've captured one of the three brothers and beheaded him, we've saved face. The others, losing one of their leaders, will surely be frightened and cower. See, caught one of the three brothers? When? During the attack. The inspector nodded in confirmation of this fact. At his words, the faces of the mercenary captains showed a sense of deflation. It said that a lucky person can do anything, and it turned out one of the three brothers led the surprise attack. The youngest, known for his impetuous and aggressive nature, had led the charge himself and ended up captured and killed. Is there still someone who is dissatisfied with the move? If so, then there's nothing to be done about it. Well, leave them behind. If they're so eager to subdue the rogues, they can do as they please. With that, the meeting came to an end. Johan did not shout at any of the mercenary captains, nor did he threaten them with his authority. Nevertheless, the mercenary captains were caught up in his words without realizing it, and could not say a word. The faces of the mercenary captains entering the Cyrindle Mountains were filled with confusion and dismay. Is beautiful. The papal residence on the mountain boasted beautiful yet powerful defenses. It was surrounded by cliffs as if they were cut out, and the only way up was a narrow, winding path. Moreover, rumors said that it stored enough food and water to last for years. How did the emperor manage to conquer this place? This made Johan even more curious. Brother, I need you for a moment. Upon arrival, after unpacking, and while the mercenary captains were resting, Johan was immediately requested. Johan nodded in agreement. He had anticipated such secret dealings. This way. What about His Excellency Bishop Biagioni? He is resting. Johan felt sympathy for Bishop Biagioni. He was excited about the honor of meeting the Pope in person, but other bishops of the miracle faction had not allowed it. What is about to happen must be kept secret, sworn in the name of God. I swear on my honor and faith. Thank you. The inspector smiled warmly. He had complete trust in Johan. Unbeknownst to Johan, the inspector had already reported on him during their camp in the forest. Please show some respect. In the quiet, spacious room, the smell of sulfur and myrrh was evident. Without being told, one could intuitively sense the Pope's presence inside. Johan entered and showed respect. However, his eyes keenly observed the Pope. Sinerna and Suitlg were very envious of Johan. They, too, as wizards, had wanted to meet the Pope in person. Johan could feel it. The powerful mystique emanating from the Pope's body, lying there as if dead. Though the body was a gaunt, lifeless corpse, the mystique was real. The bishops called Johan, marveling. They were bishops of the miracle faction. Sir Johan of the Yates family, the Duke's herald and executioner of trolls and demons. We believe you are here because of your piety. Johan nodded. Then, a feather pen began to move in front of him, writing letters on paper. The bishops read the paper together. Soon Count Kulia will be excommunicated, and her position will be vacant. Before other evil ones take her place and torment the serfs, can you step in? I shall do so rightfully. Johan spoke, concealing his rising sense of achievement. The bishops in front of him were oblivious to his true feelings. They had no doubt that Johan would be their faithful sword and shield. Count Kulia's position was one of the most tempting prizes. Located in the southeast of the Catalian Peninsula, it allowed easy traversal between two peninsulas and ample opportunity for maritime trade. Not just a few small towns, but meeting the minimum requirements of a feudal lord. Of course, all this was to be dealt with later. In case of failure, Johann would be left with nothing but the corpses of his mercenaries and the hatred of the emperor's nobles. If he failed, the order would decisively sever ties with Johann. Then swear it. Fight only for God, for your faith. I will fight only for God, for my faith. Johann kissed his sword and took the oath. The order's method of hiring reliable mercenaries and knights to fight its enemies had always been somewhat successful. Those who succeeded did not sever ties with the order. They too needed the order's power. But they were too greedy to be mere puppets. But this time, it would be different. Those gathered were certain of it. Among those entrusted before, there had been no knight so endowed with both piety and force. Chapter 114.16. By the way, the bishops are peculiar. Once they confirmed that they agree on the major part, it was time to discuss the details. As the bishops started to explain the detailed plan to Johann, he felt it was odd. This was because the bishops' insights and abilities were too imbalanced. The bishops were very adept in political justifications and situations. How to deprive Count Kulia of her position, how to check other nobles. However, in military aspects and governance, they were almost at the level of fools. One bishop even asked. And another didn't even think about dispersing and advancing. He just suggested it would be better to advance altogether. Bishop Liranero, feeling embarrassed for the other bishops, stopped them from speaking. Brothers, leading soldiers and managing horses is a knight's duty. Let Sir Johann take care of it, and trust him with it. Yes. Understood. But isn't it stronger to gather and send the soldiers? Sure, that's enough. The bishops of the miracle faction were basically ignorant about command. It might have been better if they were from the nobility faction. Or maybe a paladin who had served in the order. However, such knights usually preferred to fight alongside their brothers in the battlefield or in the order for their entire lives, and it was common to leave the position of bishop to others. In the end, the bishops who rose in the miracle faction were mostly theorists who had dedicated their lives to academia and faith, aspiring to. At least Bishop Liranero, when he was young, had been to the battlefield a few times with his order brothers, so he knew how embarrassing what they were saying was. Should have asked the captain of the guard for advice. The fewer people know about this, the better. Besides, the captain of the guard has his own duties. I am aware. The order's guard and the captain of the guard were under strict control. They were more like monks. Monitored in their contact with the outside world, they had to live a life dedicated solely to the order. The order did not want them to have contact with the outside. The moment they are tainted by the secular world, desires emerge and betrayals occur. Johann could sense the atmosphere and direction of the order from the bishop's conversation. The current mainstream of the order were the bishops of the miracle faction and the pope they supported. The pope had a tremendous authority of miracles, influencing dioceses across the continent. But the secular monarchs did not view this favorably. They continuously tried to undermine the rights of the order. Even Kardirian led his army to the front of the Cyrindel mountain, and other kings and nobles were no different in their intentions. The most pure order constantly employing mercenaries and struggling to check the nobles above and below was because it couldn't exist otherwise. Anyway, brother. Do you understand a bit now? Yes. The first thing we should target is Count Kulia. This count is currently in a very delicate position. Originally, this county belonged to the Asoda family, a pagan family from the east, who converted a few generations ago and became a vassal of the emperor. An elderly beastman from the Asoda family married an elf from the Erland's kingdom, and they had a child, but the beastman died suddenly. The beastman's siblings were excited to take over the county, petitioning for it, but the elf wife firmly refused. She declared that the right to the county belongs to the child and she would rule as regent until the child came of age. Of course, the siblings did not sit idly by. They accused the elf of colluding with pagans to poison and reported her to the church. If the wife was stripped of her title, they could easily manipulate their young niece to take the county. The church planned to use this situation. They would call her for a trial at the church, strip her of her title if she came, and also if she didn't, using that as a reason. Next, they would accuse the siblings of the Asoda family of pagan-related charges and excommunicate them. It was a sophisticated justification that the church had worked on for a long time. The opponents wouldn't realize what was wrong until the situation had progressed to a certain extent. So? What's the problem? Ignoring the oaths, Johann called Suitlig and Sinerna to discuss the events he had heard from the bishops. I think the justification we've prepared is sufficient. It's not like they're using you as a scapegoat. It definitely wasn't the look of someone intending to be used as a scapegoat. Would they have gone to such lengths if they wanted to use me as a scapegoat? At the reactions of the two, Johann nodded and continued speaking. But isn't the method after the justification a bit strange? To deprive a count of his position and then award it to me after I conquer it. Isn't that too rough? The Asada family had been in power for several generations. There would be several lower nobility families that had built various relationships under that count. Even if Johann had conquered with an army and the order praised him and granted him a position, how would they react to a sudden outsider ruling over them? I see two reasons for this. Sinurna said in a calm voice. She was better at this kind of political sense than Suitg. One is, as you already mentioned, the bishops of the order are foolish. Everyone is mistaken, but the bishops of the order aren't so intelligent to know everything in the world, right? It's not like everything is solved just by conquering and attaching the name of the order. And the other reason? The second is, even if they vaguely suspect, it doesn't really matter to the order. It's your job to control those nobles. If you're in need, you'll have to rely more on the power of the order. Chapter 114.2, 6. Johann shivered. He had underestimated them without much thought, but they had been diligently preparing even in these aspects. It was indeed true. The more the lower nobility refused to swear loyalty or rebelled, the more Johann would have to rely on the power of the order. He had been wondering how the order had been successful while using the power of violent looters or mercenaries, but now it made sense. The intangible power built by the order was something a mere knight couldn't overlook. But are you planning to break ties with the order? No. I actually like the order. Both wizards chuckled at that. It was a statement made without true conviction. Johann felt aggrieved. I know the temple is helpful in governance, and I don't intend to reject its power. But if I become too dependent, it'll be impossible to break free later. It's rare to find someone who thinks like you even before receiving a fiefdom. Usually, people just gratefully accept it and loyally serve. Why, it seems good. Knights should be like this. Better than recklessly rampaging like a dumb bull. Sinurna defended Johann. From her perspective, having seen Kardirian and his knights, it was very refreshing and impressive for Johann to make such statements. It's evidence that knights can also act delicately and consider political implications. I have a good idea. Sinurna said, clapping her hands. This method should be enough to repay a debt. It seems deserving of recognition. Let's hear it and then I'll consider. But weren't you the one who said to ask for a favor when I need it? Is that the debt you're talking about? Ah, forget what I just said. The person currently acting as the representative for Count Kulia is his wife, right? Her name was Icelia of the Bluer family. Right. Just capture that woman, force her into marriage, then find a suitable excuse to strip her of her title and eliminate her children. When a feudal lord who was trained and had the appropriate skills ruled a fiefdom, it was fine. However, if that feudal lord died, his wife or husband became in a very precarious situation. If there was a family to support them, they would receive some help, but if that was not the case, all sorts of scum would covet the fiefdom. Young and ambitious knights or relatives of the feudal lord often did this. Once they intervened, they could solve the remaining political problems with time. What? Are you dissatisfied? It's a bit much to kill a child. Then send her to a monastery. No, really, is that the only reason? Suitg also nodded in admiration at Sinurna's words. You must have learned to think this way from working under the emperor. Are we going to fight now? Sinurna. I'll apologize for him, so please don't be angry. Sinurna looked at Johann with a surprised expression. He never thought he would hear an apology from Johann's mouth. No, I wasn't mocking you. It was really an unexpected method. Isn't it okay? The dissatisfaction of the lower nobles will be much less, and even if they show dissatisfaction, their grounds will be weak. And in my opinion, if you stay there for 10 years, no, 5 years, those who will show dissatisfaction will disappear. Are you praising me too much? Well, I think it's plausible. Suitg highly regarded Johann's ability as a ruler. He was definitely not someone who would solve everything with force, like an ignorant knight. Rather, shouldn't we first worry about how to conquer it, rather than managing it afterwards? Sinurna asked Johann. Honestly, such concerns could be addressed later. The fiefdom was not even in their hands yet. The support of the order is crucial, Johann. Honestly, it's hard to conquer with just that. Soon after, support will come from right next door. Johann nodded. The order had provided better support than Johann expected. A recruitment permit granted in the name of the Pope and a new family flag blessed by the Pope himself. The non-existent Yates family suddenly became a family with a holy symbol. Inserting legendary or holy figures into the upper lineage of a family tree is something everyone does, but who would have thought the order would do it directly? Including mercenaries from the northern and central parts of the peninsula and 1,000 dwarf mercenaries. Taking into account the additional troops to be recruited, the total force almost reached 5,000 to 6,000. Johann added two things to this. One was the support of the Republic, and the other was appointing Bishop Biagioni to the diocese in Culia. The former was accepted by the bishops, but the latter surprised them. Johann stubbornly insisted on these conditions. The reason Johann was so determined to bring in Bishop Biagioni was simple. He was a bishop under Johann's control and at the same time, someone who could take the hatred of the order on his behalf. If Johann's actions went astray, who would the order suspect? Are you confident? Somewhat. Even if they were soldiers of Count Culia's side, they did not exceed a few hundred. There were no variables except for the possibility of support from other nobles of the Emperor faction in the southwest. When do we depart? Right after we get a response from Count Culia's proxy. After more than a month and a half, a message arrived from the Count's domain. It was a reply that they would not respond to the order's trial request. The order vehemently criticized this and caused a stir. Simultaneously, Johann declared a punitive expedition, holding the flag granted by the order. The mercenary captains gathered in the room realized the truth belatedly and felt devastated. From the beginning, the supreme commander had been decided. Some mercenary captains were angry or felt unjust, but it couldn't be helped. It was something the order had prepared from the beginning. They were not reckless enough to defy the authority of the order. They silently followed behind Johann. The siblings of the Osoda family were happy to send a letter. They really are pathetic. Upon hearing the news of the scandal, the original Count's relatives seemed thrilled. They were misunderstanding Johann's army. They thought he was heading south to return the countship to them. Johann sent a letter himself, kindly. It was sweet and gentle. The order and Johann were expecting a lot from them, and the siblings were overjoyed at the suggestion to join hands with the order instead of the corrupt emperor. Sir Marco, is your fiefdom in the south as well? Is it all right? No, it's not my fiefdom, it belongs to Marquis Crucho. Claiming a fiefdom as his own was dangerous for an illegitimate son. Marco denied it in horror, but Johann didn't seem to care much. It's all the same. Anyway, you might have to fight against the Marquis family, is that okay?